A flight attendant quietly requested Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett to give up her first-class seat, then offered it to a white woman. No reason, but what followed after takeoff sent the entire crew out of job by bringing down Jasmine Crockett. She had flown enough many times in life to know how things went. Like you check in board when your time comes, store, carry on and take up the seat your crew had promised twice over. No misunderstanding, no meltdown, just a few hours of cramped silence and awful coffee. But this flight from San Diego to DC already seemed a bit awry, although she couldn't quite put her finger on it. It was early 6 a.m. to be exact when Jasmine arrived at gate 35A. She had her assistant Paige a few paces behind her, phone in hand, double-checking last-minute prep for a town hall meeting that night in Maryland. Jasmine was running on 3 hours sleep, wearing a beige blazer and her signature black frame glasses. The gate agent barely looked up as she scanned Jasmine's boarding pass and muttered, "First class, seat 3A, business as usual," until it wasn't the first class. Cabin was half full when Jasmine boarded. She nodded briefly to the older man in 1B, who looked up from his tablet, then walked to her seat window, third row. She stored her bag in the overhead bin, produced her iPad, and sat down. The seat was soft, wide, and mercifully quiet. She didn't even get a chance to buckle her seatbelt. A woman in uniform, tall, mid-40s, slick ponytail and bright red lipstick, walked up to a row and gave her a practiced, strained smile. "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me," Jasmine blinked, surprised. "I'm sorry, there's been a seat error. If you could mind coming with me, we'll sort this out." Jasmine glared at her. "I'm in 3A. That's what it says on my boarding card." "I get," the woman said, still smiling. "But there's been a rebook." There wasn't an apology, no explanation. Just a strange, quiet insistence that Jasmine had to stand up now, at the corner of her eye. Jasmine saw a white woman board the plane. She looked like a girl going to Aspen leggings, a puffy coat, completely undone ponytail. She barely even glanced at Jasmine, since she just stood just behind the flight attendant, tapping on her phone. Waiting, Jasmine didn't move yet. "This is a congressional seat," she said flatly. "Reserved under my name. We searched for this yesterday." "Twice I do see, ma'am," the flight attendant said again, her smile becoming stiff. "But we will need you to sit in the back. It wouldn't be long." No one said a word for a moment. Then the woman in leggings elbowed past them both and into 3A. Jasmine's seat without apology. The flight attendant didn't get involved. In fact, she stepped aside to let her pass. Jasmine gave her a dirty look and said, "So this is how we're getting it done today." The flight attendant said nothing. There were mutterings now. The older man in 1B was scowling. A young boy across the aisle from 3A had his phone slightly angling towards Jasmine. She had no idea if he was texting or videotaping. Maybe both. Jasmine's phone beeped. It was Paige. "Do you need me to return there?" She texted back, "No. Just mark this right down, seat 3A, American Airlines flight 2275. She carefully stood up, pulled her bag down by herself, and walked to the rear, as if it didn't bother her, as if she hadn't just been ripped from her seat without cause or dignity, but it bothered her a great deal. She stepped through rows of strangers as if they did not notice her. Some did. A few offered her sympathetic looks. A middle-aged, suited man gave her a slow head and mouth shake. I noticed that she nodded once and sat down in 22 degrees Celsius, and for a couple of minutes everyone held their breath. But change was already happening. The second the woman settled into Jasmine's seat already, the woman in 3A was already sipping orange juice as if everything were normal. She wore that look of breezy certainty of a woman who knows how to get her way. That kind of woman who makes an under-her-breath complaint and everything shifts towards her. Her boots were off one, being held by the other. She didn't glance back once. Meanwhile, in 22, Jasmine sat with her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She wasn't furious, not yet, but her thoughts were racing. She wasn't the sort of woman to cause a scene, particularly not in public. That never works out for women like her. But there was something about the restrained courage of the entire exchange that stayed with her. The way the flight attendant had smiled the entire time, as though nothing out of the ordinary had happened. The way the other woman had come on as though the seat had her name. Jasmine's seat was assigned, marked, double-checked by her aide, and confirmed by the airlines. No last-minute notices, no overbooking messages. She hadn't shown up late. She hadn't been placed on standby. She hadn't been an annoyance then. Why was she moved? The flight attendant stalked up and down the cabin. their rehearsed smiles making eye contact with some passengers. But walking right past hers, the one who had stolen it from her stood back. The guy sitting next to Jasmine, a teacher from Albuquerque, from the ID badge pinned to his backpack, leaned over slightly. He spoke softly. "I saw what happened up there that did not belong." Jasmine shrugged slightly. "Yeah, it was." They did not even try to explain it. She just sat down as if it was hers. I caught him look around then, at her. "Do you think that had anything to do with what you are?" Jasmine curled her lips short. "Oh, I know it does." The teacher settled back. Eyebrows arched, he knew her now. "You're that Congresswoman from Texas, right? Guilty." He let out a low whistle. "Wow, that makes this worse or just more prominent." Further up in the cabin, a young woman about 24, curly hair, pulled into a puff-long denim jacket, hit up on at her phone. She had just taped the whole episode and uploaded it in a matter of minutes, no commentary, just video of Jasmine being dislocated, and then the other woman taking over the clip was already being reshared. Someone on the plane picked up on it and tweeted, "Why in the world would they just push a black Congresswoman off her seat for no reason?" Hashtag AA2275. Jasmine didn't know that yet, but Paige did row 17. Paige's hands were flying over her phone. She was already repeating Jasmine's messages, Director of Communications and Legal Counsel. "Something just popped into Rep. Crockett's mind on this flight," she wrote. "They upgraded her for an unknown passenger. Find out who made the call. I want names and timestamps." Cabin lights flickered slightly as the pilot announced takeoff. Jasmine leaned back, looked at the overhead controls, and thought about how much work had gone into arranging where she was, all the late nights, all the fights she'd had to pick, all the ones she'd had to let go. And now here she was, being treated like someone who didn't belong, not because of status or ticket class, but something quieter, something uglier. The teacher next to her pulled a water bottle out of his bag. "You want some?" She smiled politely. "No thanks, I'm good. Just sorry. You know that you had to deal with that again." Probably Jasmine did not respond right away. She looked at the seat in front of her. A tiny smudge of someone's thumbprint on the tray table caught her eye. Then she turned to him and said, "It's not about the seat. It's about how easy it was for her to obtain it and how no one raised an eyebrow." He nodded this time more slowly. "I hope someone up front saw." He said they did. She said they always do, whether they admit to it or not. But something had already fermented backstage far over 30,000 feet, where furtive decisions were being made faster than most other people knew, 32 rows away from 3. Jasmine remained quiet, still on the outside. But inside her, she was flipping over each line of that exchange, each glance, every silence. The longer she was present, the more aware she grew of the quietness that filled the space around her. It wasn't only the buzzing of the engines or the usual low murmur of passengers. It was the kind of silence that surrounds a moment when people see they've witnessed something wrong, but don't have a clue what to do with it. A high school student across the aisle was trying not to be discreet about staring at her. Jasmine's look caught her attention. The girl quickly looked down, then slowly reached for her phone and started typing, whether she was texting her mom or tweeting. Jasmine didn't mind, let people gossip. Perhaps someone had to escalate up. Paige was fidgeting in her seat. She'd already placed 2 calls and was waiting for a third. She didn't mind that people were staring at her, whispering into her AirPods with that pointed, intense expression. Her role wasn't to be covert. It was to be alert back in 3A. The woman who'd occupied Jasmine's seat adjusted the recline and draped a blanket across her legs. Her confidence was not loud. It was gentle, spontaneous. Assumed that she wasn't thinking about who she had replaced or what had preceded it. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she didn't care. But somebody else did. An older woman in Section 8D, white hair in a bun, was noticed by a flight attendant who strode by and asked, "Wasn't there someone else sitting in that seat earlier?" The attendant gave a brief smile and answered, "There was a reassignment, all taken care of, ma'am." Then she left it handled. Jasmine let the word hang there for a moment. That's what they always say when they want you to leave it alone. It's handled. What they mean is forget about it. She was not going to forget another ping. Her phone buzzed with a text from her chief of staff, Levi. All it said was, "Need confirmation? They pushed you out of your chair on purpose." She typed, yes, 3. Put me in, coach. White woman sat in my seat, no apology. 3 dots flashed for a moment, then got it. Hold on, this is getting bigger than us, Paige texted. Later, it's taking off. There's a clip going viral, Twitter's on it. Jasmine didn't respond. She was watching how no one had passed through to apologize, how the flight attendant who had stolen her seat hadn't so much as passed through her row since boarding the very same woman who had been so hasty to pull rank had now disappeared behind the curtain by the cockpit. And the strange thing was, nobody in the first-class cabin seemed very surprised. Nobody had complained, not even a whisper of confusion. It was as if it occurred all the time, and they just learned not to stare too long. But one person had spoken out, that older black woman from several rows up, stood up when the drinks came out, crept back cautiously and halted in front of Jasmine's row. Saw the whole thing, she whispered. You didn't imagine it. Jasmine looked up. Thank you. The woman leaned forward enough to speak without causing a scene. Same girl tried to push my niece out of a seat last month. Different flight, same scam. They make it seem like an accident, but it is not. You remember her name, didn't see it, but she had on the same red lipstick, always red. Then just as quickly she walked away, steady as ever. Jasmine shut her eyes for a fleeting second and breathed deep. She wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly, she was clear. And when you're clear, you don't need to scream, but clarity likes to travel at full speed, particularly when the wrong guy gets taken in before the right crowd. By the time the plane stabilized over Arizona, things had already begun to slip from the control of the airline in a Dallas corner office. Thomas Heller, operations director at American Airlines, sipped lukewarm coffee when his aide broke in, clutching a tablet. She seemed uneasy. You have to see this, she told him. He touched the screen. A video was playing jittery phone camera work, but clear enough it was of a congresswoman he recognized her being asked to leave a first-class seat. No yelling, no argument, but the video did not have to be dramatic to go viral. The quiet was damning, and the comments section was filling up with questions, outrage, and shock. That's Representative Jasmine Crockett. What the devil, pay for a seat and get bumped for nothing? This better not be what it looks like. Thomas set his coffee aside and took the phone on flight 275. Jasmine did not move as her phone buzzed once more. A text from Levi. I've managed to get the airline's federal liaison on board. They're ramping it up. Just hang in there. She responded with a thumbs-up emoji. The only one she ever used in row 17 Paige was already typing up a formal incident report. She had the timeline down to the second 6 a.m. gate arrival, gate 35, a 6 a.m. boarding announcement, 6 a.m. receipt from 3, A7:03 a.m., alternate passenger taken by 3 A7:08 a.m. Witnesses began recording. It was like a police report, and it had to. She knew how quickly stories get spun if you aren't first to speak. She named the witnesses who'd already messaged her privately, confirming what they'd seen. One of them had even sent video from a second camera at 38,000 feet. Jasmine's work wasn't just as a passenger anymore. She'd inadvertently become a case study in the way normal decisions lay bare. What people think they can get away with until someone brings responsibility down here. In the small law practice in Tempe, Brianna, Wexler, outside attorney for the airline, was already on board. She read over the report from the internal staff and called right back. Tell me we didn't boot a sitting congresswoman off a paid seat out of nothing. Silence, then we're still double-checking. But yeah, that's what it seems. Brianna's tone lowered. You're going to have to take the lead attendant off duty before that plane gets into D.C., and I'd like transcripts of all internal comms off that flight from boarding on. Again, there was a kind of stillness in Jasmine's section. The man sitting beside her wasn't speaking any longer. Neither was she, but there had developed between them a still knowledge he did not try to end the silence with pity. He just left it there. That in itself was a sign of respect. 2 rows in front, the girl with the phone was now reading comments out loud to her mother. They're saying the flight crew's already under investigation? She whispered someone from D.C. is involved. Her mother replied with a gentle good. And up in the first class, the woman in Jasmine's seat was still oblivious. She ordered a second mimosa, laughed at something on her screen, and leaned back like the world could not find her. She had not looked back at all, had not asked who she was replacing or why. But others were now paying attention. The internet had a way of placing quiet wrongs into the spotlight, especially when the wrong person was being silenced in the wrong way at the wrong time in the cockpit. The pilot was quietly warned by corporate a red line internal flag had been triggered. Flight 2275 had to be checked at once. Landing instructions were unambiguous, require the lead flight attendant to report directly to the terminal office. Attendant to report directly to the terminal office prior to deboarding. Nothing more. No reason, just a shift in tone. Everyone up front was freaking out now, but the real change wasn't taking place inside boardrooms or email threads. It was taking place seat by seat as travelers began asking the one question airlines hate most. Why Flight 2275 landing at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport at approximately 1:15 p.m., the wheels struck the tarmac harder than usual, but no one complained. Passengers sat rigidly waiting for the seatbelt light to go out, but the true anticipation had nothing to do with bags or gate changes. Something had happened. Mid-air individuals didn't just want to get off the plane, they wanted to hear what would happen. The head flight attendant, still wearing her red lipstick and pulled back ponytail, possessed a brittle serenity around her as she stood beside the cockpit door. Her name tag read G. Addington. She didn't smile today. She hadn't glanced toward row 22 at all since flight, and she didn't glance at the eyes of any of the passengers as they stood up in row 22. Jasmine waited. She wasn't in a hurry, that was on purpose. Let the others go first. Let the world catch its breath behind her. The Albuquerque teacher stood and looked at her for a moment. I hope this is attended to. Jasmine nodded once it will, and like that he entered the aisle and disappeared in the rest of the crowd up in the terminal. Paige was already texting landing staff waiting at Gate B, 14 legals on standby in the meantime. In the terminal, 2 men in navy blazers standing against the wall by the jet bridge, one with a clipboard, the other with an earpiece and a folder under his arm. They were not TSA, they were not security, they were airline management, and they were not there to do a courtesy check-in as the front seats began to deplane. Whispers began again. Some of the passengers turned around to the back, like they were trying to get a glimpse of Jasmine. Someone asked, she's still in the back, right? And then halfway down the jetway, the lead flight attendant was stopped. Gina Addington, the man with the clipboard, stopped her. She blinked. Yes, we need you to come with us. She didn't object, but the look in her eyes, surprise small, spoke volumes. She hadn't realized it would come to this. Certainly not so suddenly. She was taken into a back room off the gate, while the other attendants glared at each other, but said nothing. In that room, she was told she was being placed on immediate leave subject to a full investigation. No comment, no press contact. Turn in your badge. Her voice cracked for the first time. I was following orders. We'll see, one of them said. We've already received gate logs, manifest internal messages. If there's paper trail, we'll find out back in the terminal. Jasmine came off the jet bridge and into a hallway where 3 of her people awaited. Paige stood a bit in front of the other's, tablet in hand. They pulled the video. Legals already getting statements. You've got CNN requests the Hill and Good Morning America. Paige had told Jasmine, hadn't even flinched. Not yet discovered. She looked around. A handful of passengers stood close by. Some were in hushed tones. A man raised his phone as though he wished to take a picture, but changed his mind. A woman who'd been sitting in row 10 came forward. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry that happened. I didn't know who you were initially, but I witnessed everything. It was wrong. Jasmine nodded. Thank you. Do you need me to make a statement or anything? If you're willing, we'd really appreciate it. Paige cut in. I'll take your information, as the woman jotted down her contact information on a form. Another voice sounded out, one of the airline executives who had whisked Gina Addington away. Congresswoman Crockett. Jasmine turned. I just wanted to make you aware we've opened a formal investigation of this incident. We take it very seriously. You'll be listening straight from our executive team. She noticed him. Neat haircut, shiny shoes, carefully chosen words. He wasn't speaking from the heart. He was speaking to dampen fallout. Jasmine gave him the kind of smile you save for moments like these, the kind that says too little too late. Ensure they call my office, she said, not just my PR team. He nodded, but the apology wouldn't fix what had been done. It wouldn't erase the silence, the dismissal or quiet resolve of a woman who had known that she was something worth something that never belonged to her. News doesn't travel slow anymore. By the time Jasmine reached DC in her hotel, the video had been watched over 2.3 million times. Hashtags were trending. Seat 3A had Congresswoman Crockett, AA227, 5 and flying, while Black the posts were brutal, divided, merciless. Some folks were angry, others were in denial, but nobody was ignoring it in her suite at Capitol View Hotel in Arlington. Jasmine sat on the couch brim, still wearing flight clothing. Legs crossed at the ankle, television was off. Phone was on vibrate page by the window, eyes glued to the screen. Of her laptop, they've just grounded the entire flight crew. Not only the lead, them, all of them, Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Them all, corporate, move, clean, sweep, easier than attempting to figure out who knew what. Jasmine left that hanging for a bit, then said, "It's not about punishment, it's about the assumption page turned. What do you mean that I didn't belong in that seat that she did? And no one even batted an eye, no one asked, they just moved me downstairs." 2 reporters from other publications were already waiting in the lobby for a statement. Page had turned down all such requests for now upstairs. Jasmine scrolled quietly through her messages. There were apologies from airline executives, private phone calls from other members of Congress, and a voicemail from a person in the Department of Transportation. Everyone wanted to talk, to reassure, to resolve the matter. But Jasmine did not want to resolve the matter. She wanted recognition not for herself, but for each and everyone who had been silently displaced, dismissed, or overlooked without a camera rolling. Meanwhile, at the Airlines Dallas headquarters, a crisis group had convened. In the late afternoon, the VP of Public Affairs, Cynthia Tran, had already dispatched a preliminary apology, but legal had rejected it for being too performative. "We can't simply say, 'Sorry for the disruption,'" she snapped. "This isn't a coffee spill," the general counsel interrupted. "We're not conceding bias until we have proof of internal communications." Thomas Heller, still sitting at the far end of the table, had finally made his voice heard. "We do have proof. We pulled the crew chat logs. Everyone be quiet." He continued, "Someone called a VIP seating dispute at 6 a.m. The name Jasmine Crockett was mentioned. The reply from the senior flight attendant said, 'Handled, redirected to rear cabin, guest in 3. A has been moved. No reason, no fault.'" Cynthia closed her laptop, then we were done. Another exec joined in. "Not if we act, fire everyone on it. Public announcement, direct apology to her office, full internal audit." Cynthia glared at him. "You don't fix a rotting floor by polishing the rug in the hotel suite." Jasmine spoke softly into her phone. She wasn't angry, she was determined. "Yes," she said, "I want a complete public apology. I want their crew retrained. I want something written down, not a hashtag, not a press release, something binding. And I don't want this turned into a diversity headline. This isn't a story about me, it's about a trend." Then she hung up and sat back that evening. American Airlines posted a statement. "We are aware of the incident with Repanel Jasmine Crockett on Flight 275. We are carrying out a full investigation and have taken the crew members involved off active duty. We are committed to making our policies demonstrate respect, equity, and accountability." The reactions came flooding in, some clapped, some mocked it, but most of them asked one thing repeatedly: would this have happened if she looked different? That was the real weight of it. Not the simple yanking from a seat, but the quiet calculation that caused someone to think they could steal her away at all, without hesitation, without fear of consequence. And they almost did. But actions carry weight when the whole world is watching, and this time the quiet choice to ignore someone had a price by morning. The next day the uproar hadn't stopped. It had sharpened morning shows, aired the story back to back, cutting between shots of Jasmine displaced and shots from congressional hearings where she grilled corporate CEOs with the same measured cutting skill she showed on that flight. Reporters framed it as a reckoning, but Jasmine knew better. This was no reckoning. It was a glimpse at how quickly people in power, no matter uniform, decide who fits where and how quickly others accept it. In an interview that week, Jasmine sat across a local DC, anchor, arms crossed, posture open, not defensive, grounded. "Do you think this was about who you are?" The anchor questioned. Jasmine didn't bat an eyelash. "It wasn't about who I am. It was about who they perceive me to. Not be." The anchor stopped, visibly shaken. "What do you hope comes out of this?" Jasmine looked directly at the camera. I wish people would stop waiting for proof to hold on to what we've been saying all along for decades. I wish one seat on a plane would remind someone that unintentional racism doesn't wear a hood. It smiles at you, it calls out to you. Ma'am, it says move like it's doing you a favor. The interview went viral within the hour, but for Jasmine, it wasn't about going viral. It wasn't about being the center of attention or the face of some popular indignation. It was troubling all the other passengers who had stood there and watched her be moved and done nothing. Not out of malice, out of habit, out of fear. Out of that deep, quiet unease that says keep to your own, even when you know a person is being harmed. Because silence when it's easy is a force, she thought of the teacher sitting next to her. The old woman who came back to talk to her. The woman who had spoken to her mother in hushed tones. They hadn't screamed or waved their arms or stood in the aisle. But they had seen it, and seeing it made it more real than telling somebody. Seeing it and knowing that it was actual was where the wall would start to break. A couple of days later, she received a letter, not an email, not a statement, but a handwritten letter from a woman in Pittsburgh, middle-aged flight attendant of 22 years. It was handwritten. It read, "I was not on that flight, but I've seen that kind of thing happen. I've allowed it to happen. I didn't mean to, but I let it. I'm sorry it meant more to Jasmine than some corporate apology, because responsibility does not always include headlines. Sometimes it involves a quiet admission, a difference, a pause, a decision not to let it go next time. Jasmine didn't want the woman in 3A hassled. She didn't want the flight attendant sabotaged, but she wanted something else than that. For people to understand they were acting like it was some sort of lone mistake she had spoken years before in a speech. Most prejudice wasn't in raised voices, it was lowered standards. Who gets grace and who gets questioned, who gets the seat and who is asked to give up. And now millions and millions had been observing what happens when the wrong woman is asked to give up something that had already been paid for, not a seat, but her dignity. And this time the world paid attention. If there's a lesson here, it is. This sometimes the best argument you can make is the one in which you don't take umbrage, where you remain silent. Because being present already said enough. So the next time someone sees something like this, someone being ruffled, brushed aside, calmly substituted, they won't merely gawk and scroll. They'll recall this flight and maybe they'll say something, because occasionally justice doesn't come with a bang. It starts with one woman not moving. If this video made you think about something or remember something like that, you're not alone. Subscribe for more real stories, asking more difficult questions and reminding us why how something happens is as vital as what happened.